modernized Ethiopia, creating a national army, restructured administration, and established sovereignty of the Ethiopian nation-state. Both Turkish and Egyptian forces invaded and failed to conquer Ethiopia, so they decided it was time to do a little conquering themselves. Under Menelik II, Ethiopia expanded physically with only minor atrocities committed. He expanded infrastructure greatly, made a central taxation system, and created statewide education. This made Ethiopia one of, if not the most advanced nations in Africa at the time. And with all that, his greatest achievement was actually fighting off the Italians, who had previously been promised this slice of Africa to be scrambled. The Ethiopians ended up winning at the Battle of Adwa and signed a peace treaty with the Italians. They wouldn't come back until 40 years later when they got a little edgy and fascist, this time invading with machine guns, chemical weapons, and tanks. And yes, I lied, Ethiopia hadn't been independent ever since the Classical Age, but it only spent 5 years under Italian rule. More modernization under Haile Selassie, who was overthrown when gas prices got too high, and Ethiopia had a little flirting with communism. The USSR helped them defeat the invading Somalis, who at the time were in a winning position to take a decent chunk of land. And after the fall of the Soviets, Ethiopia transitioned into a democratic, in theory, republic. Today, Ethiopia is still dealing with modernizing the country, improving infrastructure, food production, capital, as well as dealing with some of the ethnic tensions and a certain mega dam being built. Modernization efforts in the mountains have protected and advanced Ethiopia much ahead of Africa in the past. Why shouldn't the trend continue? Demographically, Ethiopia is in an interesting position. Its population pyramid is a literal pyramid, meaning the country of already 115 million people will boom in population, reaching 200 million by 2050 and around 300 million in 2100. Just 40 years ago, Ethiopia had a population of less than 40 million people. This new population means that around half of all Ethiopians are under 18 years old, which of course, when you're looking at the countries of the future, having a young population now means a middle-aged population in a couple decades, and a middle-aged population means a highly skilled, able population to grow the country. But, like all countries which have a massive surge in population, there will be some unrest. And like many African nations, that unrest will likely come in the form of ethnic tensions. Ethiopia is after all still a multi-ethnic, multilingual country. The largest ethnic group and language is the Oromo, making up about a third of the country. The second largest group is the Amhara, with their language Amharic, making up about a quarter of the country. The rest are smaller regional groups, none making up above 6% of the population. The Somali, the Tigray, Sidama, Guruje, and many others make up this portion. Over the course of millennia, many ethnic groups have been blurred by interracial marriage, especially in the core highlands, but outside, on the outskirts of the country, there are certainly distinct pockets of non-Oromo, non-Amharic people groups, most in the south and west, but most notably the Tigray in the north and Somalis in the east. When the country inevitably has tension due to the rising population and industrialization, it's in these regions where the pain will go, while the central areas reap the rewards of a modern country. And the country has a long way to go until fully industrialized, with an urban population of just 20%. You will likely see more ethnic groups on the outside try to break off of Ethiopia in the future, at least until the center is rich. Then of course, they'll beg to stay. But just when will that heart of Ethiopia get rich? After all, it isn't exactly that wealthy nowadays, ranking 63rd worldwide by GDP and 167th by GDP per capita. The country hopes though that it will grow tremendously. The population may cause some light unrest, but undoubtedly it'll bring jobs, education, and cold hard cash to the nation. Right now, the Ethiopian economy is fairly pre-industrialized. 85% of the labor force and 40% of the GDP works in material extraction, mainly in farming different vegetables, yet mining is a substantial business in the mountains. The other 15% of the labor force and bulk of the economy is working in industry and services. Industry like making textiles, clothing, and engine or aircraft manufacturing, and services like finance, telecommunications, and transportation. It is expected that these latter two will absolutely explode as the young population starts filling these jobs. Ethiopia is expected to become a manufacturing hub of Africa, and with the continent's population growing to 4 billion by 2100, the Ethiopians will certainly have a large market in their vicinity. If Lagos, Nigeria is trying to become a continent-wide financial hub, the New York City of a new Africa, Addis Ababa will be the Chicago, a manufacturing and transportation center of the continent. However, Ethiopia still has a long way to go before it is the African powerhouse, and Africa is a massive continent with soon to be billions of people. Why is Ethiopia going to be its power? Why not the 50 other nations? Why not nations which are already powerful nowadays, like Nigeria, Egypt, or South Africa? Well, to be honest, most of the 50 other nations shouldn't even exist. They were drawn up by the Europeans using straight lines and rulers, ignoring natural and ethnic boundaries. Ethiopia was the only major African power to survive this, and even if it were colonized for real, the mountainous core provides a physical territory the Ethiopians could have used to unite themselves. During the population growth of Africa, it's very likely many of these countries will collapse into smaller nations bounded by ethnic and geographical lines which actually make sense. Some important countries nowadays have a good chance too. Ethiopia's ethnic diversity is on its outer borders. Its future civil conflicts will be minor compared to some of the others African nations will experience. That's what the Tigray War is, a small uprising with no real chance of splitting off from the country. But even then, there will be new nations to rival Ethiopia, and many nations have a good chance of surviving too. How will Ethiopia face the other African nations? In its direct vicinity, there are weaker nations like Somalia. The Somali have caused quite a big geopolitical reaction compared to their size from their location directly along one of the busiest trade routes in the world, and their little anarchy which has caused a little piracy along that route. Almost every major world power wouldn't mind a